The U.S. first introduced a standard 5-day, 40-hour workweek in 1940. This was 14 years after Henry Ford introduced this 40-hour week schedule in the Ford Motor Company. This has been the standard in the U.S. for over 80 years now. But now there seem to be indications that this may be changing from a 5-day to a 4-day work week.
State lawmakers are set to consider a 4-day work week.
In this video, we're going to talk about the latest updates and what it all means for you. So let's get into it. In 1938, Franklin D. Roosevelt signed into law the Fair Labor Standards Act, also known as the FLSA. This law specifies the minimum wage, which was originally set at 25 cents an hour, standard work week, when workers must be paid overtime, and age restrictions to prevent child labor. The FLSA has been the primary labor law in the United States for the past 80 years. There have been a number of changes, most commonly to the minimum wage, every few years, yet in the same time, the standard work week has remained the same. Henry Ford is often credited as one of the first employers to implement a 40-hour work week. He paved the way for the legislation, and the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed 14 years later. Now, in the present day, we're seeing innovative companies piloting 4-day work weeks, and we're seeing states propose legislation supporting these 4-day work weeks. So it begs the question, are we on the precipice to the first significant change to the standard work week in over 80 years? There are many companies leading the way to revise the standard work week. According to an article by Tech.co in September of 2023, there are at least 11 companies that already offer a 4-day work week, including Buffer, Carfax, and Kickstarter, among others. Builtin.com has also published a list of 25 companies who have started offering a 4-day work week, with some of the same names. While some companies are only implementing it for part of the year, there are many on this list that have fully implemented it. And finally, most notably, in November 2022, CNN reported on a large trial with 33 companies and 903 employees, with the majority being based in the United States and Ireland. The majority of those who participated in the trial reported planning to continue with their 4-day work week. While most people see this as a positive development, it prompts the question, why now? Juliet Schor, a Boston College professor and outspoken advocate of the 4-day work week, says that COVID is the impetus for this change. People are starting to think more about not just where they work, but how many days they're on the job. Dr. Schor is also leading the research efforts for 4-Day Week Global. Their team is conducting research on some of the most promising 4-day week pilots across the globe. And we'll talk more about that research later in the video. And companies aren't the only ones leading the charge for a shorter work week. In just the past year, several states have made the news for proposed legislation. This includes Massachusetts, California, Pennsylvania, and several others. Massachusetts has a proposed bill to incentivize employers to offer a 4-day work week in exchange for a tax credit.
So if this bill is passed, it would create a pilot program to study the concept of a 4-day work week. So here's how this would all work. So employers, they would have to apply and qualify for it, and then they'd have to study the benefits and impacts of a 4-day work week and regularly report their findings for at least 2 years. Now, by participating in this pilot program, employers would qualify for a tax credit.
At the time of this video, it is actively being discussed, and it's unclear whether it will gain enough support to be put into law. Massachusetts isn't the only state to propose legislation to either mandate or incentivize a reduction in work hours. California is putting forward a bill that it first put forward in 2021 to reduce the standard work week to 32 hours. Pennsylvania has 2 proposed bills with different strategies. One proposes a reduced work week for employers with over 500 employees, and the other proposes a 3-year pilot program for 70 employers who want to opt in. The second proposal is remarkably similar to the Massachusetts bill that would also incentivize employers to implement a 32-hour work week. These are not the first laws to be put forward by state lawmakers. In the last few years, similar proposals have been put forward by lawmakers in Hawaii, Maryland, and Washington. Unfortunately, these did not gain enough traction. As of yet, state legislation has not been successful in implementing policies to reduce the standard work week. But local governments across 24 states have implemented a 4-day school week that impacts 1,600 schools. This policy effectively gives the teachers and administrators in those schools a 4-day work week. There appears to be an increasing appeal for school districts to embrace the revised schedule to both reduce costs and improve recruitment efforts for teachers. In addition to schools, state legislators are pointing to pilot programs across the globe to make a case for the 4-day work week. The study being referenced by all 3 states with proposed bills is the UK 4-day week study. It is reported as the world's largest 4-day week trial with 61 companies and 2,900 employees. The trial happened from June to December of 2022. The results of the trial speak for themselves. 92% of the companies have continued with the 4-day work week after the trial. The reported benefits are for both employees and employers. 39% of employees were less stressed, 71% had reduced levels of burnout with improved work-life balance, and employers also saw healthy revenue growth and reduced turnover for employees. I mentioned Juliet Shore earlier. Here she is summarizing the findings of these studies as the local news focuses on proposed Massachusetts legislation.
We've shown that a 32-hour, 4-day week works not just for employees, as you might expect, but also for employers.
It is still unclear what the outcome will be of the proposed state bills and other state legislation to follow. If history can teach us anything, it's with innovative companies charting a new course, it's only a matter of time before policy catches up. On this channel, we have long been proponents of a better work-life balance and exploring part-time work. While we're waiting for legislation to catch up to the increased demand, it's important to ask the question, what could this look like for you? How could your life change if you reduced your work week by just 1 day? We've already seen that employees who work 4 days a week have less stress and better work-life balance. That's a result of having an extra day a week to relax, do chores, go to doctor's appointments, and still take care of the things that you need to in your work and your life. While it's my belief that we will get to a standard 4-day work week in the not too distant future, I also believe that many of you could make this happen in your own life without legislation. You can start by negotiating with your employer or applying to a new job with an employer that offers a 4-day work week. There are many resources available to you if you want to start the conversation with your current employer. In fact, 4-Day Week Global has created some excellent resources on its website for starting the conversation. I'll link to these resources in the description below. And by acting now, you can be part of the first waves of innovative workplaces that set the standard for future legislation. If you're going to switch companies for better work-life balance, it's important to know how to interview your next employer without jeopardizing your chances of landing the job. Check out this video if you want practical tips on how to do that well. And as always, thanks for joining us today and enjoy the journey.